Greetings, I'm Herbert Erpaderp, and would you look at that, it's time to start ballasting my model railway. The ballast I've chosen to use is this legacy ballast, Light Grey Blend. I believe this is a sister company to DCC Concepts, thus the DCC Concepts packaging. I'm hoping this works well, because I've got a lot of it. I figure it's better to have too much than not enough. I figured it would be a smart idea, and not too difficult, to make a test piece, and for this I've glued some track and roadbed onto a bit of foam. You could of course test on an out-of-the-way bit of your layout, but this does seem like a better choice, especially if you're good at cocking things up, like I am. I've also painted the track similar to my layout, just to see if there's anything I should worry about in regards to paint, though I don't expect there is. It should probably be noted that I'm more or less following stuff that I've read or seen other people do, like pretty much everybody else, I would guess. Anyway, I applied the ballast with a spoon. I don't have a ballast spreader thing, and I could probably 3D print one, but it seems like if I did use one, I'd still have to shape the ballast a bit and remove bits from the sleepers and sides of the rails anyway, so I think a spoon is fine. I tap the top of the rails with the spoon to make the ballast settle. The reaction here is a bit more pronounced on the test piece than the actual layout. The layout has enough mass that the whole thing shouldn't move with gentle tapping from a spoon. I used a couple of brushes of different shapes and stiffness to shape the ballast how I wanted it, and to move bits off the rails and sleepers. This is where most of the time in this is spent. The edges of the roadbed kept poking through, which was kind of annoying, and I thought about cutting that back, but at this point it was a bit too late. Eventually I got the ballast looking something like how I wanted it, so it's time to fix it into place. First, I mist the ballast with isopropyl alcohol. This is to take care of the surface tension, and it says it's 100% isopropanol. I'm not really sure how much the percentage matters here, but it seems to work well enough. Obviously this is misted on to avoid displacing the ballast I've just spent however long shaping. I apply the glue in a similarly careful way. I'm using a small dropper, which I figure is fine if you're working in small sections like this. I'm mostly trying to apply the glue to the sleepers or rails, so instead of drops hitting the ballast and displacing it, it should flow down across the sleepers and gently into the ballast. This should result in the ballast staying put. The glue mixture I went with was roughly 1 part Mod Podge Matte, 3 parts water, and a little dash of the alcohol, again for surface tension reasons. There's a lot of different mixtures you could use for this kind of thing. This seemed like a good starting point, and I was pretty happy with it. I might use a little bit more Mod Podge in future, but this mix did work very well. You can see that I've cut quite a lot of the roadbed away on this side. It is a bit of an extreme cut, but I'm an extreme kind of guy. I forgot to film myself applying the ballast to this side, but I think you've pretty much got the idea of how it's done. And it was a lot easier to get the shape I was happy with without the edge of the foam roadbed poking through. I would consider this a successful test, so let's take it to the layout. I didn't really set this shot up very well, but you can see what I'm doing. It's pretty much the same as the test anyway. I applied the ballast with a spoon again, in a relatively small section. That just seems like the best way to do it. Then I spent a bunch of time fiddling with it to get the shape I wanted, and to make sure there were no errant bits of ballast on the rails or sleepers. As you can see, I've ballasted in past where the tunnel mouth is going to be. I've heard that in real life, ballast doesn't stop at the mouth of a tunnel. Hopefully I've got it in far enough that it looks convincing. The next thing I do is obviously mist the isopropyl alcohol, and then apply glue in the same way as I did with the test piece. The only differences here are that I put a little bit more Mod Podge Matte into the glue mix, not that it was a very precise mix to begin with. Also, I noticed the IPA evaporated a lot quicker, probably because it was the middle of the day and the weather is currently hot. It doesn't really look all that good while the glue is wet, and there are definitely a couple of bits of ballast that have made their way onto the top of the sleepers. It's not entirely unrealistic, but I feel like too much of that would look bad. I used my knife to gently shift them, and totally forgot to film myself doing so. It's probably obvious to say, but even though the IPA and glue mix don't seem to cause the paint to run, it does make it a bit soft, so if you are removing bits of ballast from painted areas while they are still wet, you do risk damaging the paint. You can always do touch-ups of course, but it's better if you don't have to. To continue further down the line, I'd have to ballast some points, and to be honest, I just wasn't really up for that extra little bit of careful work that day. I also plan to put a signal in the area, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do those yet. Ballast might get in the way, so not applying it there makes life just a little bit easier, so I'll skip that for now. Here's how I ballasted the section where the two halves of the layout join. It is basically the same as at the other end, and the test piece. The main difference is that we don't want the ballast to fall off the end of the board, so I've made a dam of sorts. This is just a piece of foam that I've taped fairly tightly to the end of the board. It doesn't really look all that good here, because there's missing sleepers and some partially visible wires and some terrible soldering work, but that's okay. The plan is to put a road bridge here, or maybe a tunnel, mostly to try and hide the gap between the two sections. Okay, here's the big reveal. Ooh, I think it's fair to say the chunk of foam has performed its job well. There is a couple of chunks of ballast that have slipped below the top of the board, but I'll remove those later. I have seen other people use thin sheets of plastic for this, but they were doing so with the sections of their railway joined together. This was a lot less effort than joining the two boards together. I was pretty happy with the result I got, more so with the second section. I did do a little bit more without filming it, though not a lot. It is kind of slow going, but this is probably something that's better done slowly than rushed. It seems like it would be kind of a ball ache to pull it up and do it again. I started on what I'm considering to be the back section of the layout, and while it is going to have scenery, it isn't going to be the main focus and will be a bit less visible from the front. So I figured starting at the back made sense, because by the time I get around to the front and more visible sections, I'll have made a bunch of mistakes and hopefully learned from them, so it should look better there. It's a sound theory anyway. By then I might have figured out signals and anything else that needs to be close enough to the track to impact ballasting. I feel like I've learned a good amount from doing this. I'm obviously not claiming to be an expert, and this is more of a what I did video than a tutorial, as always, but hopefully it can help someone. I'd say ballasting isn't quite as daunting as you might initially think. My opinion there might change once I get to the points, but so far I've found it pretty simple. The main thing is that it's a bit time consuming shaping the ballast and making sure there aren't any chunks on the rails or sleepers, but like I said before, it's better if you don't rush. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comments section below. Subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of thing, share it with anybody you think might find it helpful, and if you really like what I do, consider supporting on Patreon or Ko-fi. There's links in the description. Take care of yourselves, be excellent to each other, and thanks for watching. Farewell.